I'll make a motion to call the meeting to order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Does anyone have any items they wish to disclose tonight? No, I do not. Lily, Frank, no, okay. The first item we have is a proposed change to what we formerly called the village speed hump policy. Frank and I met last week with members of the Pittsford Fire Department and the Ambulance Corps, and I'm going to let Frank summarize what we discussed.
We met with the emergency responders. Their concern was our speed hump policy and how it would go throughout the village and create havoc with their emergency vehicles. We had a very constructive conversation, and to be brief, we decided that we would begin to look at other alternative speed calming measures versus the use of speed humps. Unfortunately, we had intended to put speed humps on Maple Street, but we're not going to do that now. We're going to consider some other alternatives. We changed our speed hump policy. Now we're calling it our traffic calming policy, and we've added that whatever we do about traffic calming, we're going to confer with the fire department and the ambulance corps. And I wrote a memo to everybody, which you have, and I think you saw, so that's all I have to say.
Will it be on our website also, or do we have to adopt it officially as our policy first? Or are you just
We can
deciding
adopt,
that
it's a policy, so we can adopt it by resolution, but I think that's a very good idea. We should post it on the website.
Well, we have the policy now, Dorothea.
Correct, we have the current policy as it reads on the website. The one in your packet is the amended one, so if the board does go ahead and adopt that policy tonight, it will go up on the website as the previous one was.
Okay.
So we need a motion to adopt the,
Frank, I had a couple questions before we adopt it and change it. Under the process, under item 2, about the fire department, how does, it says that it would just go before them. Do we need approval? Do we need, like, what in the process actually needs to happen? It just says send it to the fire department, but what needs to happen?
no, we would actually meet with them to go over a request for speed humps and to determine whether we are going to do it or not, and if there are ever any other options.
I have a proposal here. Why don't we just add at the beginning of that bullet, say, review with fire department and ambulance service.
Okay, but we're under no obligation to get approval
There is-
necessarily?
There is no legal requirement that the fire department or the ambulance service, we don't require their approval, we're doing it as a courtesy,
Okay.
because we're all one community.
Okay, so that bullet's new, that second step is new, right? In
Right.
the amended
Correct.
process?
Correct.
Okay, and then the other thing under selection criteria about not having them on parallel streets, is that a new addition? I mean, that sounds like,
No, that has been there.
okay,
And
Right.
the reason for that was that usually when you install speed humps,
they'll go to the next street. So we'll just
street,
put them on all the
neighbors on the
streets.
next street want them, and neighbors on the next street want them. So we have to be careful how we're gonna do this.
Okay, so what has changed? Just the bullet number 2 in the process about how to include the
Just-
fire department?
Yes,
The emergency-
just number 2 and the name.
Okay, and then I have one small change, if we're gonna be adopting this tonight. at the very end, the last paragraph where it says, should the candidate street not meet the above criteria? On bullet number 1, it says history of accidents clearly related to speeding, where the vernaculars now is crashes. That's what they're calling it in like DOT and traffic calming. They call them crashes, not accidents anymore. So if
Okay.
you want to be up with the vernacular, change accidents to crashes.
So we want to change that to crashes.
Yeah,
All right, we can do that.
that's all.
And with Bob's
So
change as well.
You have that?
So, right.
And I have another change also I want to propose. On number 4, because I think that's confusing as to what we're getting at, Renee, that one of the parallel streets.
Yeah,
I think what you could say is traffic calming studies should look at both the individual street as well as the broader context.
right,
And then you could continue with the rest of the language there, because that really explains what that is
Yeah.
about.
yeah.
Frank, can you review the specifics of why the speed bumps, I can't call them speed bumps, I grew up calling them speed bumps, were not approved for Maple?
The fire department, for Maple Street, they were very concerned because we had received complaints from other streets right next to Maple. And they were concerned that we would be getting requests from all those streets in that area. And rather than put speed humps everywhere, look at alternatives. And I think the mayor was going to check with our traffic consultant to see if there are any other options.
Yeah, what we said we would do is take a broader look, assuming that there are speeding issues on Elmbrook and Locust Street, to take a broader look in a discussion with a consultant, how do we deal with the whole thing? What they didn't want to see is speed humps on every street, because that causes them a problem. Individually on Maple Street, we don't think they care so much, it's more the precedent. And so we said we would take another look and get some advice from the consultant on kind of a quadrant strategy for that part of the village.
The challenge, I hear you guys on that, the challenge on that is that Maple, the way it exists, it has sort of a wide end to it. And it's really easy to come off of South really fast. And it's not a narrow turn to get in there as it is on Church and Locust. It's a wide turn, so you can hit Maple going pretty fast.
I'm just wondering, Frank, if that is going to change when South Street is repaved and the new curbing and the ADA compliance is in place. Will that change, will that narrow that?
That's a very expensive job. We've even thought of that at the corner of Boughton and South. Because
Same thing.
that's another
Same
area
issue,
where the
right.
cars go off
Mhm.
and they really speed. But we haven't decided on that yet because the South Street project is still under
In design.
consideration.
In design, right?
Well, if we don't put speed humps there, to take care of that big wide, turn, which I think that's are you guys the ones that end up with people knocking
Right, yeah.
bushes down every year?
We're
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the corner of South
Yeah.
and Maple, so.
So, and we know that the fire department probably won't, I mean, a hindrance would be to take that curb out, further, to slow people down, to make it less wide. So if we're not putting speed humps, what other things can we do to help them temporarily slow down?
Well, not being a traffic engineer, I'm not sure that I want to talk to the traffic engineers. And if we don't get, we could even just talk to Fisher or another firm if we don't get solutions.
That's all right.
But I'd like to come with a proposal, but I haven't been able to coordinate a time to meet with Steve and David Cruz at SRF.
So when they did the traffic study, they only did they looked at the volume and speed, but didn't come up with any solutions when they did the
No,
traffic study a couple of years ago?
The traffic study, I don't have it here, but for that street, the average daily volume was something like 257 cars. And there's only, I don't know,
It's a 200
20
yard long street.
yeah.
So it's a very narrow street. There
Yeah.
are 25 kids and, there's a lot
Yeah.
of traffic there.
I think the real issue is the speed on South Street, and when cars are coming from Jefferson, they really don't need to slow down to make the turn onto Maple. So they don't. And they come flying up Maple, and they do that for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want to go continue along south up to the light at the library because they know they're going to be stuck there for a long time. So it makes an excellent cut through for them. And they choose Maple also because they don't have to make a 90-degree turn as they would on Locust or some of the other options there. And we also see a lot of traffic going to St. Louis because that's the most direct route to get up to St. Louis. So there's always a big rush right before Mass.
Yeah, and we've actually gone to the school to alert them to the problem, and hopefully they've sent something to the parents.
So our neighbor said on my place that they did that many times before. I think they wanted to have stop signs on Mann Place, or they were talking about it. And they said they went to the school quite some times. They were a little frustrated on Mann Place because they say they did that before many times. And, not much came out of it.
Yeah, and the other week when you and I talked, you did mention stop signs
Yeah.
at Maple and South. You mentioned stop signs on
Yeah.
Grand. You also mentioned that some of the neighbors on the other streets were asking for speed humps. That's why we decided we should be looking at this larger rather than just Maple
Well,
Street.
I mean, we
Well-
were thinking first of Maple Street, that was our first concern. But since you said there are no speed humps, they cannot be there, then our second suggestion was like, okay, if you can't do the speed humps because of the fire department, why don't you put stop signs up? Because that would solve a lot of problems. It will solve the rent place issue, which they have, because people go very fast, to St. Louis and cut through there. And so that would solve their problem of rent place. It would solve our problem because they would at least, go slower from South Street into Maple Street on both sides. So at least that would help a little bit because they would have to stop before they go, run up to Maple Street and to Rand Place.
Would you clarify that for me, please, Joseph? Do you mean the,
Two stop signs, so one is
on
for
Rand or
Rand
South?
Place. So one on Rand Place and one on South.
Got it. Oh, thanks,
So
John.
both of them,
So at each end of Maple Street is what you're
Yes.
thinking?
yes.
So highlighted south and Maple.
You can kind of see how South has a,
You can see right there how you can.
kind of just a gentle bend
Yep.
to it, right at Maple Street. So nobody really appreciates how much of a bend that is when they're driving down South Street, which is actually, that is the longest stretch of uncontrolled road
Yeah.
in the village.
Right.
So any road of that length in the village has either a stop sign or a traffic light in it. So when they're coming from Jefferson, they either come screaming around that bend or go up Maple. When they're coming from State, they usually hit the telephone pole in front of my house. We've lost track. We stopped counting how many times we've had to go out there. It's ridiculous.
Unfortunately, I've actually seen them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am too.
So, on the last page of that document,
How many times?
I outlined where we could put a test stop sign out there. I appreciate that doing curbing and other things are expensive endeavors, but this seems like a price-sensitive
Yes.
solution.
I think it solves multiple problems, actually, because South Street has terrible speeding problems, I don't have to
Right.
tell you. And this is a low cost and effective, even though technically under New York State highway law, you're not supposed to use stop signs as a speed controlling device. They do work. And a comparable situation would be if you go to Lincoln Avenue and Sutherland Street.
Right.
That probably has about the same flow on Sutherland as South Street has, so that would be a very comparable situation. We obviously, what's that?
We did Boughton.
Absolutely.
It would.
But I think it would be a game changer on South Street because people see that as
Oh,
a
yeah.
straightaway and they fly. And,
We do.
you know, maybe we need 2 stop signs on South
Yes,
Street.
please.
But we need, that's why we want to sort of take a quadrant look versus just a street look, because if we coordinate all this together, we might be able to efficiently solve multiple problems, which we know exist.
What about a test? You know, 1 month test or something?
Well, the first thing we need to do is just vet it with the traffic engineers to make sure that we're not doing anything illegal that violates New York State highway law. That's bureaucracy in New York State. But that's a possibility. That's a possibility. So,
Then what about a, you know, so if we're not gonna solve this tonight, what do we
But
think
the
about
other-
putting a timeline on when our next action item would be?
well, the next step would be to have SRF take a look at this, and in coordination with the final traffic calming plan for South Street. And this would be something that could be implemented in the winter. The other advantage of it is, unlike the speed humps that have to come out with the plows, this would work year round. So I really think I don't know if I credit you for this, but kudos.
And this
I think it's
doesn't
a good
impact the
solution.
emergency responders. I mean, the problem with the pumps is that
Correct.
people who are hooked up in the ambulances and whatnot, and they get to blow right through.
They
the
can
stop
go right
signs.
through stop signs. It doesn't impede them whatsoever. But
And while you're at it, you know, maybe you can put one also on Rand Place, you know, just in
Agreed.
Maple Street,
Agreed.
and also to calm that section down.
you know, at Ram Place, I wonder if it should be at Maple or if it should be at Elmbrook. Because Elmbrook is, if you look at the map, it's kind of the midway point, so that might,
But I think they have the main problem where, you know, where Maple Street comes up, because there's the school. So I don't know if, you know, I don't know what.
well, we'll ask the traffic engineers to help us figure it out.
The advantage of Maple and a stop sign at Maple and Rand is that that's where the buses are. So that would also naturally slow people down as the buses are
That's
letting
true. That's
students
true.
out.
Yep. Very
So
good.
in addition, is there anything that you can do now? Like, for example, like the kids walk to school, so they go off to Jefferson Road, and now we have this crosswalk. Can we ask the police to come over and just monitor that crosswalk, or do something now? Because
Yes, we can do that.
Today, I just wanna give you the example. They stand there, they wave that flag, and cars go by and by and by, and it's a group of 4 or 5 children. Today, I saw a cop go by, 5 seconds, cars that were passing this way, past that cop car. Guess what they did? They stopped for these children. It was amazing. I was just like, okay, I wish that cop car would drive by every morning at that time, because then they can get to school safely.
We can call Captain Andy DeLisa and get a car over there, and we will do that. Would you mind doing that,
Yeah,
Renee?
I'll do that.
All right, great.
And you want him to be on Maple, or should he be on South? Where would be the best vantage point? Usually I give him like specific place to park or to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, what do you think, John?
I mean,
Maple is my thought that they can see both ways.
yeah, it's,
If they park on South, I don't know how that's gonna actually impact the traffic, but
right. I
it'll
mean,
slow people down.
yeah, I mean, Maple would be great, but, and it is quite visible, when somebody's sitting out there, so.
Okay, good. Yes.
I have a question. Why is it possible that the speed bumps are on Barton and on Upper Rand Place, but they cannot be anywhere else? So, what happened there? I mean, because there are some speed bumps in the village, but why can't, I mean, you know, people are trying to slow everything down, and there are speed bumps, so does the fire department not have a problem with those speed bumps?
The ambulance and the fire department, they don't like speed humps or speed bumps because the ambulance doesn't like them because if someone's in a gurney in the ambulance and you go over a hump, it can cause a problem. The fire department don't like it for a similar reason. so they object to it. Marty, yes?
I would propose that the effectiveness of those temporary speed bumps is pretty minimal, because if people drive them, they quickly learn how fast you can go over them.
Well, and you can speed spike, and that's why there's a whole, believe it or not, there's a whole field of study of, and this is an evolving science right now. And, you know, one of the things I've learned from we started studying this topic in 2005, is that the technology and the theory behind it is evolving. So there's always new tools that come out, some of them work, some of them don't. We're certainly willing to try different things to see how effective they are, and if they don't work, we can always try something else.
But I mean, is the fire department not worried about those ones, about the other speed bumps on Barton and Grand Place, and like, do they not have a problem with those?
I don't think they like speed humps or speed bumps anywhere, am I right? They were particularly concerned about them here because they were concerned about the precedent. I think eventually, if we told them this is the only thing that's gonna work on Maple Street, and we're not gonna put them on Elmbrook or Locust, they would probably be okay with it. But we're trying to coordinate with them and cooperate as best we can, so that everybody is in agreement on what the best solution is. We're trying to consider everybody's concerns. Excuse me. Nahoka, you had a question? I saw your hand up.
I was just, something you said before, you haven't been able to make an appointment or meet with the traffic engineer, is that right? And that's why you guys haven't been able to make a comprehensive plan. So there's gonna be parallel planning, like a short-term plan of the police officer and then the pilot of the stop signs, in addition to sort of the comprehensive plan. Can you give us sort of like an idea of what that timeline would be? Because I don't think this is a new issue, and so, and you know, one of the great things about living in the village is, for me as a parent, being able to send the kids in there, but if the traffic is so terrible, you always have to worry about the drivers not seeing the children. And so it's an urgent issue for us, so can you give us a sense
Sure.
of timeline?
Yep. The sheriff usually responds pretty quickly. I had complaints recently on Sutherland Street, and they, with the opening of school, as I'm sure you're experiencing also, and they had cars there on the first week of school, so they're pretty good. That we can happen right away. We can probably, within the next week, we can set up a meeting with a consultant. Usually for them to respond on something like this, it's probably gonna take them at least 2 to 3 weeks, because if you work for a firm like that, there's a schedule and we've got to fit in among their other work. We would bring it back to this meeting, discuss it with the rest of the board, and you folks certainly would be invited to participate in that as well. Something like a stop sign, our crew can put those up. So optimally, if that ends up being the solution, we should be able to accomplish it by sometime within a month and a half, would you say, Frank?
Yes, I think so.
Can I,
We'll let you know, Josie.
can I
I'll be in
ask
touch
that,
with you.
I'm sorry, Frank. Can I ask that Renee be involved in that? I'm sorry to volunteer you, since you have expertise in this. Can I ask that Renee be involved with SRF as well?
Sure, we can all be involved. I mean, Frank has really been working with the Maple Street residents, so if Renee, you would like to be involved,
I
you're
can help
welcome
out,
to.
sure.
Yeah, we can get you, yeah. Include you in that.
Peter, I saw your hand up.
Well, Peter was up first.
Peter?
I'll go first. So if the issue was a wide turn there to begin with, the thought might be when you repay, you might think of some kind of median in Maple Street. So you have to turn that way. And if that doesn't work, then I would suggest you consider essentially the equivalent of what you would think of as a speed hump. But rather than being in the lane that you're driving in, make it perpendicular to South Street and in the center of Maple. So you couldn't make a wide turn without going over a speed hump. It would slow traffic, slow turning traffic. It's been done in cities quite a bit in order to make the crosswalk safer. So you don't have people cutting corners. That's a very easy fix.
They wouldn't be landing in our Edgerton, and their telephone poles right there, if they're speeding,
No,
they
because,
hit the
no.
bump.
Yeah, they would hit that before they came, right, exactly. So they'd have to turn into the lane that they were gonna turn into. That's all.
There's a couple other things that we've been discussing on South Street that might also help. Right now, I think there's only one yield to pedestrian sign on South Street, is that right?
Right.
And we've talked about adding a mid-block crossing beyond Boughton Avenue, because right now you have that long straightaway stretch where people build up speed. But if we had a mid-block crosswalk with a yield to pedestrian sign in the middle, that would prevent them from ever building up, 40 miles per hour, which is what we found in our speed study. Many people travel down South Street. Okay, Justin?
Yeah, while you're discussing the South Street section, and I live on Fountain Avenue, and I have a stop sign right by my house, and I think as Frank, you could also attest that that's mostly ornamental. People slow down a little bit sometimes, but people blow right through the stop sign, so it's not like a catch-all, so.
It's not very effective.
Slowing down
So,
is better than
I
speeding.
know where I grew up, what was very effective is having a police officer around there at random times, so you never knew when they were gonna be there, and people learned. If they just had a police officer at Maple and South, not only would they make an outrageous fortune on speeding tickets, but even if it was just a random day, once a month or once every 2 weeks, I think that would make an enormous difference in fixing some of this. And I'm sure they'd make lots and lots and lots of money, so, anyway. But what I wanted to bring up is, when this came up before for discussion, I was inquiring as to what's being done about Wood Street in South. Because that's probably one of the most dangerous intersections in the village, because people going down Wood Street, you're going up a hill, there's almost no visibility to the left, because there's a house there that has a fence and there's shrubs, and then cars come by at almost 50 miles an hour sometimes down South Street. So it's a very dangerous intersection to drive out of. I didn't know where you were at with improving that, but.
Well, one of the reasons we postponed the reconstruction of South Street is because we are doing a larger project that includes some infrastructure repair, some handicapped accessibility, things that we're required to do, and making traffic calming improvements for the whole street, because that is, in terms of speeding on Village Street, South Street obviously is one of the worst. And I don't think you finalized the plans yet, have you, Frank?
No, we haven't. We actually wanted to pave South Street this year, but the more we looked at it, and the more we looked at what needed to be done, the cost went higher and higher. We wound up, the cost was gonna be between $225,000 and $250,000 to pave South Street. What with all the rebuilding of the crosswalks and the curbs. So we couldn't do it this year, and we're looking at a way to try to do it next year. We're trying to get some more grant money to see if we can do that, because South Street is our problem.
Yes, Josie?
One more suggestion. In Germany, the stripes, the crosswalk stripes are much wider. I think they're very small. Maybe you just can paint them a little bit wider.
So they graphically stand out more.
Yeah, I think they're.
We can also do piano crosswalks with, in addition to the 2 stripes, having stripes in between. And we've tried that on some of the more problematic intersections already.
Yeah, just wider, more visible or something.
Yep, agreed.
And one more question. I saw that in East Rochester they have a speed limit of 20. Is this something which could be done for the village too, or is this?
We are in the process of working with our state legislature to get, and the town and the school district are going to support us to do a village-wide 25 mile per hour, which is, that's the lowest we can do a village-wide speed limit, and that would be not only village streets, but also the state roads as well. And it's been a long process, but I think we're close to, I believe, in the next legislative season in 2020, we should be able to get that passed. I'm hopeful. The other thing we can do is we can set lower limits on individual streets. And that's something when we meet with SRF, we can ask about, of going to 20 or even 15 on a street like Maple Street. Because really, when you think about Maple Street, the width, the parked cars on the street, that, and this is not according to me, this is according to our traffic engineers, an appropriate travel speed for a safe interaction between pedestrian cars in a residential street like Maple is about 15 and no more than 20 miles per hour. Okay. Any other questions on this? We will be in touch with you, so as soon as we get a revised proposal or a blessing for the stop signs that were your proposal, we will let you know.
We'll be in touch with you, Judge.
Okay. Thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, that's,
Thank you.
it seemed like he wanted to contribute.
Well, I
Leo has a
so
question.
he brought something, he read something about crosswalks at school, and I don't know if
Do you want to tell us about it, Leo?
Do you want to tell them? Because maybe they don't know about them. Okay.
It's okay.
Well, I guess there are certain crosswalks that actually are an optical illusion, and they jump out at you when you're driving by them, even in the daylight. And so he was reading about them, and he brought them that up to us, asking if
We've
that's a
actually
thing to do.
studied those a little bit. And there's some of them that they look like, when you approach them from one direction, they look like three-dimensional blocks. It only works from this way, it doesn't work from this way. The other thing they found with those is that it works the first time someone goes down the street because it startles them, but then people get used to them and they ignore them. So, but we are looking at that's just one example of the different tools that are being tested to see what's effective and what works well. Okay? All right.
Thank you.
What did you think about skipping?
Thanks for
that?
coming.
Most people are here.
It was good to see you guys.
75 and level.
I know.
Well, you have to excuse us, we've got to go pick up somebody from cheerleading practice.
I just wanted to mention, we did send a letter to St. Louis. We have gotten a reply, which I have.
Are you gonna, do you post it? Is it something I can read?
Oh, sure,
Or
sure.
is it going to be posted somewhere that I can read?
It's actually up on the website.
It's a quote.
Yeah.
If you go to tonight's meeting under the meeting packet, it's in there.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we can go to 75 Monroe.
I don't have an agenda, so.
You did. I left you a new one on the table. I left you a whole packet.
Okay, you're okay? Okay. All right. We have an update on 75 Monroe. You heard recently about a decision in the FOPV case over the open meetings law, where the judge decided that the village would have to pay the legal fees for Friends of Pittsford Village. There has been a number in the paper. That's a top amount. There's no negotiated number that has been agreed to, nor have we engaged in any settlement talks yet with the representation from the Friends of Pittsford Village. There has also been in the press, and a press release from Mark IV, an offer to negotiate. And so we earlier tonight, we had an attorney-client session with our attorney, and I want to just give everyone a summary of where we are in this whole process. Just so you know, there are, we believe, about 10 lawsuits. 2 of them have been filed by the Friends of Pittsford Village. 8 have been filed by Mark IV. And there's actually 2 more that don't involve us. Mark IV has sued Village Green, and they've also sued the CSX Railroad. Because Mark IV has stated that they would like to negotiate, it's important for everyone to know that the APRB, the Planning Board, and the Board of Trustees at various times since the beginning of this process in 2012 have tried to negotiate with Mark IV, with different attorneys and different negotiating parties. They've never been successful. However, we are willing to accept Mark IV's offer. But it's important to understand that the 2 pending cases on 75 Monroe, they have to do with the Historic Preservation Board and the Planning Board. One of those is in appeal, the other one hasn't even been heard yet. Those are two independent boards, and the Board of Trustees, and under New York state law, there's a firewall, so we, as the politically elected board, can't interfere in the work of the other independent boards unless we dissolve those boards. So, you know, it's surprising that Mark IV is asking to settle with us because there aren't any more pending cases that involve the Board of Trustees. But we want to hear from them. So I think earlier, our board, I think, is in agreement that we would invite a proposal, a written proposal from Mark IV for settlement, and we will respond to that in a timely fashion.
Bob, do you want to read, we had crafted
Sure,
this language
sure.
and we all agreed that it was.
I'll read a statement
Right,
that was crafted in the meeting. In most cases, the trustees aren't involved in these multiple cases. One is brought by PCP, one is brought by the Pittsford. I think there's a mistake in what you wrote there, Dan. One is brought by PCP against the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals. Another was filed by Pittsford Canal-Side Properties against the Historic Preservation Board. Yet another was initiated by the Friends of Pittsford Village against Pittsford Canal-Side Properties and the trustees. That's the current case. 2 weeks ago, Chris DiMarzo asked us to work with us to settle the 75 Monroe lawsuits. The trustees support the idea of resolving this, but we don't have the power to, and since we're not the party in the suits that are pending. The specific case was brought by the Friends of Pittsford Village, not the trustees, so the trustees don't have the power to settle the case. We can't settle a case that we didn't initiate. In the spirit of trying to resolve matters, we're asking PCP to provide a written, firm settlement offer, and we'll respond in a timely manner. Bring a firm offer to resolve this in a way that might satisfy the multiple parties involved, and we'll do what we can to bring the various parties to the table. Anything else anyone wants to add to that?
I have a question that,
Sure.
time. Can you elaborate as to who that identity or spokesperson is for the Friends of Pittsford Village? Who is that?
I'm not clear who's on their board currently.
I think the president of the Friends of Pittsford Village is Amy Valistra, but their legal counsel is Ellen Knopf. I'm not sure who represents the board or who would be their spokesperson, and I'm not sure of the membership myself. I know it's changed. I don't know what the current membership is. Yes.
If I could just play back just to make sure I understand, because it obviously is a little confusing. Is it that Mark IV has come to the Board of Trustees as almost you guys to play facilitator between Mark IV and our HPB, is it HPB and PZBA board, to say, hey, if you and Mark IV, you meaning the trustees, can come up with a solution, you guys would then present it to the two boards? Is that, am I hearing that right, or do I have it mixed up?
Well, we can promote it.
Right.
We do not have the legal right to mandate what either board does. They're independent boards, and there really is a operational firewall between each of these boards.
Yeah.
But we would certainly support any viable proposal. We would take a look at and do our part in it. Obviously, Friends of Pittsford Village, we have the least amount of influence with them. On the current case, Mark IV and the village board are actually on the same side of the case, and Friends of Pittsford Village is on the other side.
And then as a resident, how do we find out from HPB and PZBA what their actual end strategy is for all of this? I mean, the only strategy I've seen for 8 years is dig our heels in deeper, and maybe someday the big bad builder will go away and, you know, the old question, how's that working out for you? And from a principle standpoint, hey, maybe they're right. Maybe what they're building's too big and all of that, wherever you stand on that. But from a practical standpoint, it's a loser strategy. So I'm wondering, because when we come to you guys, or when I come to these meetings, and I get, in fairness, you say, hey, Dave, I can't, you know, it's not in the trustees, you know, the issue isn't with you guys. How do I find out what the strategy is for HPB and PZBA?
Well, I think you'd have to contact, we really can't speak for those boards, we don't have a right. The other thing I would say in terms of, you know, the process that's been followed here, we are a defendant in every case that's been filed. We legally, anytime, regardless of the merits of the lawsuit, frivolous or substantive, a municipality is legally bound to respond to every case. And the schedule that it follows is at the mercy of the courts. It's highly unusual what has happened here, because in the original case that was filed, the one that the judge just made a decision in, the original papers for that case were filed over 6 years ago. And so it really is the court that has extended the period and cost not only the village, but also the applicant hundreds of thousands of dollars that didn't need to be spent. So it's important to understand there's a lot of moving pieces here. We control some issues, but not all the issues, and that's even speaking for all of us, have a hard time keeping all of these cases straight, because a few we're involved in, the other ones we are not. And, and it really is, you're at the mercy of the courts.
So,
Dave,
but I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
But
I
to
don't
answer-
really have an answer to the question.
to be specific,
Yeah,
really the most we can do is try to bring people to the table
Right.
in most cases. And as for where you get the information, yes, check with the various
Okay.
boards, because we can't do that.
I just want to say, I'm glad you guys accepted. I hope it was a short convo on whether you should, because having conversations over this is gonna go a lot further than, like I said, digging the heels in. And Bob, if I could, at some point, maybe in a newsletter or something, I'd love a more detailed timeline. Like you said, a lot of moving parts. Typically what I see with respect when I hear, you know, say your stance on it, it makes it seem like, you know, we're the good guys who made no error along the way, and it's the bully builder, right, in it for the money. Which I always laugh at, because I'm like, I don't know about you, but I go to work for the money too. So these guys are looking to make money. Yeah, exactly. But it's always kind of positioned like this big bully pushing the village around. But to get here 8 years later, we made mistakes along the way. You know, someone annexed that plot of land to the village. It wasn't originally part of the village. Somebody met with the builder initially. Somebody accepted the proposal where they did the remediation and spent money to do that. Then the wheels fell off, and look, I don't know the details, but I'd love at some point in future communication, a nice, you know, breakdown of that, because maybe you would say, I'd say to myself, boy, Dave, you're wrong. We really are totally the good guys here. But I don't believe that. So I just request that at some point if you could.
Well, actually, in our agenda tonight, we have a proposal to do an enhanced newsletter, because there's 3 things that we want to communicate with people on that they're complicated, and it's hard to boil it down in a way that's, because without writing the Encyclopedia Britannica, there's a lot of information that we would have to cover. But that is in the proposal on the agenda tonight to do just that.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. Peter?
Just a question with regard to, you were talking about a settlement with Mark IV. The settlement with Mark IV is over I assume it's sharing of legal fees to be paid to Ellen Knopf as the attorney for Friends of Pittsford Village, is that where you're?
Well, there is no proposal, so we don't have any idea, and I don't wanna put words in
Okay.
Mark IV's mouth.
Okay.
We
fine.
have, they haven't suggested anything, nor have we received anything.
Okay, so my question is, did the judge or has your attorneys explained to you why the village is responsible for those fees and it's not already a shared responsibility of the developer and the village? Why is it that they aren't already responsible, as long as they were respondents to the same lawsuit?
There is an issue with the fees. The attorney advised us that's not something we should talk about right now because there is some negotiation that's taking place on an issue. So we can, at a future date, we can disclose that, but we really can't do that tonight.
And it's a fair question, and we heard you on it.
Yep.
You meant,
Yes, Dave?
Yeah, I just to get back, I actually spoke with the chairman of the EPRB, who advised me they spent hundreds of hours negotiating, trying to negotiate with the developer. So people think there's been no negotiating, it's just not the case. Secondly, the court has upheld that size and scale is a valid application of the APRB to determine the project. That's a fact decided by the court, so we're not pulling something out of thin air. And lastly, my understanding, and I may be wrong on this, is the proposal of the developer has never been scaled down. If they had a financial hardship, if they said what the code allowed to be built as a max, subject to architectural review, if they could not build something reasonably profitable, they would be allowed to build up to the level it needs to make a reasonable return on investment. They have never raised, to my knowledge, the issue of financial hardship, put numbers out to show they have to build the maximum they can put on that property. So I think people have to have that context here. I think the use of legal fees is changing the subject focus from the merits of the project and the size and scale which the APRB has jurisdiction over. And the court has concluded that.
Thanks, Dave.
I see a hand there.
Somebody said,
Hi, Lisa.
Dave made a really good point, because I think what a number of people may not be aware of, any applicant, whether it's for your door being changed or for, 75 Monroe, has within the code a mechanism to make the case for hardship. And that has never been made to any board, any of the boards, by the applicant. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
And I want to make one other observation, just as a lay opinion, I'm asking for comment of the board, and legal fees. The open meeting law pertains to that aspect of trustees' meetings where the judge concluded, and it could be appealed, that they violate open meeting law. That's what fees would be paid for Friends of Pittsford Village. Friends of Pittsford Village opposing the project, I don't believe the village will pay for any more than the town of Brighton's going to pay for the neighbors complaining on the Whole Foods project. That's separate from the open meeting law. So those fees incurred are not totally liable by the village if it's concluded they are liable.
That is correct.
That's
Susan,
a big game changer people need to understand.
Susan, I saw your hand up.
yep, Susan Lotto, and I'm not, you didn't identify yourself, I don't know who you are.
Dave McGee.
But I'm on the planning board, and so I'd be happy to talk
Great.
about our history with Monroe 4. But first I have a question, and that is, do you anticipate a new site plan from Monroe 4? In that.
You mean in terms of a settlement proposal?
Right.
We were just speaking earlier, we don't know what to expect. I think the problem in the past when different parties have tried to negotiate with them is that we've had the premise of negotiations, we get to the table, and then they take 3 steps backwards instead of having a real proposal. So I think what we've done this time is ask them, provide a written specific proposal that we can respond to, and then we'll direct it to the parties that would be involved. But we don't have any indication of what they're thinking, and we don't know, honestly. Okay, any other questions?
There's an opening right now, right, on one of those boards.
Yes.
And are all the board members appointed by the board?
No, under New York State village law, all appointments are made by the mayor. They are subject to board approval when a term is, it's a new term. If it's an unexpired term, if someone resigns or has to leave the position, then board approval is not required. But they're all mayoral appointments. Every village in New York State operates the same way.
And you said something about unless we dissolve the boards at the beginning. There's a firewall unless we dissolve the boards, which I'm not suggesting or anything. I just want to understand like all the.
Sure. The reason there's a firewall is because regulatory boards, we have a ZBA, a planning board, and a historic preservation board. They're essentially volunteer boards that use criteria in the code to review applications. There's an operational firewall in state law to ensure that the political influence of the trustees doesn't influence or create a biased or unfair regulatory process in those boards. That's why that is there. The sub-villages, the authority of a planning board is held by the village board. Generally, that's in very small rural villages that don't have the type of activity that you would see in a village like this. It's unusual today. It used to be much more common, but technically you could rescind the authority of the planning board and bring that back to the board of trustees. You could also do it with the preservation board, or you could eliminate the preservation board. But it would be much more difficult for the Board of Trustees and highly unusual for the Board of Trustees to act as a preservation board also.
You said operational firewall. Are we in a gray area? Because when it comes to litigation, you obviously have the financial responsibility for the decisions. So it seems like operational, yes, but when it comes to litigation, the fiduciary responsibility, are we in kind of a gray area?
The village board has a responsibility to provide the money necessary to operate the budgets of the other boards. But we do not make decisions of who their legal counsel is, what they spend on it. We do our best to get an estimate that we think will cover their costs based on the issues that we are facing, but we can't really dictate what those costs are. We just have to provide the money.
And they're basically following the law, like the code.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Peggy, I saw your hand up.
Will the offer by Mark IV be a public offer that we can all see, or is it something between the attorneys and the various?
Normally, if you enter into a settlement agreement, and I can say this from past experience, it would be confidential until an outcome is achieved. And that normally protects both parties, so you can have a free discussion, and there usually is a non-disclosure agreement, so that neither party can use what was said in settlement in future litigation or in any other action against the other party. And it's intended to protect both parties in the negotiation.
And how does the Friends of Pittsford Village be involved in this whole negotiation?
Well,
Since they actually prevailed in the open meetings law lawsuit, which.
Well, that's an open question, and we can't answer that because we don't speak for the Friends of Pittsford Village, and nor do we control the Friends for Pittsford Village. So that's a wild card. That's an issue that's between Mark IV and the Friends of Pittsford Village.
And what is the judge's involvement in this settlement agreement? If one should happen to happen.
He would probably have to approve it. It would be something, I assume, that would be negotiated between the parties involved.
I just want to reiterate something you said earlier about the 6 years that it's taken for the judge to make the decision on the first lawsuit.
Correct.
And if he and made the decision that he made in December, in February of 2013, I think,
Correct.
we wouldn't be here today.
Correct.
And people need to understand that.
And
that it's not our fault, it's not even Mark IV's fault, it's his fault.
Well,
And I have so much to say about that I will when the time comes.
I think it's an important point,
It makes
though.
me so angry.
It's, you know, we certainly have spent extra money because of that delay, but so has Mark IV as well.
I know.
and I believe probably Friends of Pittsford Village also, because all of the parties
A
have.
lot of treasure, human treasure, financial treasure, goodwill, all because the judge did not make a decision when the concern was brought to begin with. That was many, many years ago. And he's to blame more than anyone else, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. And I don't think there's any good guys or bad guys in this. I just think if there's any bad guy, it's him. So that's what I have to say at the moment.
But jumping on Peggy's question about
Mhm.
disclosure, and you said a non-disclosure in your negotiations, that sounds like it gets us right into the open meeting law problems that started this. So can you say that statement about what non-disclosures might be in place as you negotiate this?
Usually, anytime you enter into a negotiation for almost anything, you have a non-disclosure agreement, because you want to have an unfettered, free discussion, so you can brainstorm, suggest things without those being used against you in the discussion. So it is standard practice, and I've learned this from the beginning in all of the negotiation sessions that we've had, even when we negotiate with the labor union for our annual renewal of our 2-year labor contracts. That is always in a closed meeting. And normally it's conducted with, 2 representatives of the board, but because it is negotiation, you could technically have the whole board there and it wouldn't be meeting. Now, once an agreement has come, then you can't do that in a closed session. That would have to be done in a public session like this with probably an explanation of, well, we're doing this because of A, B, C, and D. So you can't make the deal behind closed doors, but you can get to a conceptual agreement, and it allows you to have a better, supposedly a more productive discussion.
Can I jump in
Sure.
on that?
Yeah.
So Adam, you raise a really good point. And so I think that what we're going to do is hopefully get something from Mark IV that is worth our time. And then we talk to our attorneys and say, well, what do we do with this? How do we make this public or not public? How do we conduct meetings around that? We have to be very careful. So we think we know what we need to do, but we obviously got dinged for this in 2011. And so we'd be very careful in talking to our attorneys about that.
Thank you.
Yes, so Lisa, I see your hand.
Just to follow up on that thread, because I think it's important people understand, if Mark IV is interested in negotiating, and you have a preservation board, and you have a planning and zoning board, and you have a board of trustees, who's negotiating, and how do these 3 boards come together to create some sort of final decision? Because each board has different criteria.
That's right, that's right.
So can you speak to that, or?
Well,
And to be clear, I'm sorry, Brian.
yeah, no, go ahead.
And to be clear, the trustees at this point, as far as what is outstanding litigation, have no final say in this settlement. There are only 2 boards who do, and that's the HPB and the Planning and Zoning Board. We actually do not, as a
I
trustee.
understand that.
But I know, how do we get them to the table and to agree? That's the question.
Yeah, but I understand that relative to those 2 cases pending before each of those boards, but I am keenly aware that there was court-ordered negotiations by the judge. So how does that all fit in? Help us here.
Yes, I think at this point, our fingers are crossed that at this point, the developer will present a firm written offer, and that will be what would be on the table for consideration, rather than walking into a room and sort of just having a
For
conversation.
consideration by your board, by the trustees?
No,
or by the judge?
we can't,
How do we wrap this up?
we can't unilaterally do that. So, that's why we were sort of perplexed by Mark IV's offer, because we're not the primary entity in
Right.
this whole process right now, because this is the last case that involved the village board. The pending cases don't even involve us. They
No, I
involve,
understand
right, so we have the same question and we do not have an
that.
answer.
So it's
Lisa.
all in the ether?
Right,
Okay,
correct.
just checking.
Yep. Yes.
What can we, as people who are not on the board, are trustees, but are residents and are paying taxes and, want to see progress, what can we do instead of just waiting and coming to these meetings and being told to wait, what can we do?
Yeah, what's the plan?
Let the people who are responsible for doing their jobs, do their job.
Yeah,
Yeah, to Begg's point, support the boards. Create a position of strength.
Okay, let's not have
informal.
conversation between each other, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let's direct everything up there.
Right, so, but you don't have any suggestions?
Well, there's a legal process here that regardless of where we all feel, you know, politically or philosophically on the merits of the different positions and the different parties in this, once the legal process starts, we have to follow the law. Each of us took an oath of office to follow New York State village law, which is what we've done. That's why it takes so long. There is no, you can't opt out of that unless you get a settlement. You have to follow that legal office, otherwise we're violating our oath of office. So there's no easy answer here, and that's what's so frustrating about it, both the time the court has taken and the number of lawsuits that have been filed. Yeah, Dave.
I just wanted to talk, you know, in the face of public opinion, to the trustees in this discussion with PCP and Mark IV. Be careful to present to our other boards the thought that anything that they've done, in my view, was anything but supporting the code as written, supporting our comprehensive plan as written. We have two amazing boards underneath this trustee board that have been preserving and protecting this village for years at the great expense of political capital. So when we think about what can we do as residents, it's recognized that these trustees, I think on some point, are putting themselves out there almost as a middleman, to your point earlier, at the risk of seeming that our other boards have done anything but the right thing. And so I just want to stress the care and careful consideration as you entertain that thought of being the middleman between those other lawsuits, that you truly support those boards, the work that they've done, and exercise as much political capital as necessary to financially support them as well moving forward.
That's a very good point, and I think everyone here should understand the hard work. These boards every year have literally spent hundreds of hours in deliberation, in research, in negotiation. They do not get paid for this, and they do it for the love of the place. And many people have heard me say many times that the village we have today is not an accident. It's only because of the work that these boards have done over the last 4 decades. When I was growing up, the village of Victor looked just like the village of Pittsford. And they've gone 2 different routes for growth and development. But I think you are correct. The work and the professionalism that we have on our 2 boards is amazing, and we're very blessed to have that. And we owe great thanks to the selfless work that the volunteers on our boards do every year. Yes, Susan.
And I would, in answer to your question, what can a citizen do? Some meetings have already taken place, so that that chance has gone. But they're very carefully worded and crafted and research findings that accompany the meetings when decisions are being made. And those are all on record. And so you could, it's some work, but you can have a look at the site plan that was presented to us. You can look at, for example, the LWRP, which is a document that requires the planning board to evaluate the site plan according to existing criteria and see where decisions have come from. That would be an easy way to see what you can do to get your arms around it.
Do you know what an LWRP is? I mean, just so people know, local waterfront revitalization plan that basically tracks what canal fund.
I see one more hand.
Yeah, Bob, was there someone else who were calling on me?
No, I think it was your comment.
Okay. So,
Go ahead.
can you just clarify for me, I missed, Peggy was saying, hey, if the judge had made this decision 6 years ago, we wouldn't be here today. Which decision was that? I know you said there's a lot of different lawsuits. What was that one?
The case Peggy was referring to, I believe, is the Friends of Pittsford Village suing the village board over the open meetings law, and that was the case that was just decided a week ago.
Okay.
There were a couple other things in that lawsuit, that
I mean,
as well.
only if it's pertinent to this, I didn't know why that would mean we wouldn't be here today. That one doesn't seem like.
Because basically the decision, the judge said that the decision was made behind closed doors.
Right.
And this is my perspective. The decision that was made was that they needed 167 units to make a decent profit. And they made that decision behind closed doors. So from then on,
Peggy, you need to address the board.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
from then on, correct me if I'm wrong, they stuck to that 167 units. And I've been to court over these past few years with the Architectural Review Board, the Historic Preservation Board, with FOPB, and the judge has tried to make them settle, but then he would take the side of the developer on certain issues anyway. But it's all based on the fact that they have stuck to their 167 units. And the Historic Preservation Board doesn't care about the number of units. They just care about the mass and scale of the property. So it all boils down to them being resistant to 167, to less than 167 units. And it'll be interesting to see if they come in with a lower figure now to the Board of Trustees. And then I don't know what we do with it. Then maybe we take it, I don't know.
New site plan.
Yeah.
New site plan.
And also, again, 167 units that was decided out of the view of the public, is presented to the judge. Yeah, in 7 years, just to go back to what Dave was saying and I was reiterating, this applicant has never once to any board used a case of hardship. They're just sticking to 167 units,
Correct.
and no one knows with any empirical evidence why. No one knows. We have no financial findings of fact.
Well, if I'm the builder and you approved 167 units initially, why would I feel obligated to show you hardship that I need to make it less than that?
Because it's always subject to the APRP.
Dave, you have to address the board.
Yeah.
That from the trustees is not
Address the
binding.
board.
Dave, you have to address the board.
The trustees are not bound by that. They're setting what the capacity can be, but it still has to pass other parameters with the planning and zoning board and the site, and with the APRB and the size and scale and mass.
Listen, I understand all that. I'm just saying that back to my original point, and just to disagree with you a little bit with that full positive support, I don't think our boards have that pristine record, or we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have approved 167 initially. That's been battling all this time. So, that's all I'm saying.
The trustees approved
I do.
167 units.
All right, so one of the boards, that's what I'm saying, man.
Yeah,
It's not, we're not clean in this. And Mayor, that's what I'm asking you to start owning that a little bit. But I do have a quick question, and my info could be old. I read that Frank was a member of the Friends of Pittsford, is that what, Friends of Pittsford Village? Like I said, it could be old info, it was an old article. Just curious if Frank will be involved in this discussion with the builder.
Well, the applicant made a statement that Frank was a member of Friends of Pittsford Village, which he was not, and that he gave them $14,000 and he never made any contribution to Friends of Pittsford Village. That statement was made, but like many statements that have been made and have been in the press, it was factually incorrect. I think, okay, Dave, go first.
I just have a question about process, and it relates a little bit to Susan's comment about a negotiated settlement, going back through site plan review, architectural review, and it dovetails in with your comment as to the board's ability to dissolve the PZBA and the HPV. Can there be any assurance that we have that any negotiated settlement still requires and that you will uphold the PZBA and HPV's authority to act independently of any current new site plan presented or negotiated settlement?
Well, I can speak for myself, and I can say that, and I probably, if you ask the other members, I think most of us would agree with that. Anyone else
And it's
wanna
also
report?
premature. We don't know what they're coming forward with. If they're gonna come forward with anything at all.
Certainly respect that, though the comment being is, to what extent is there a risk that they could present something new that then is entirely handled at a trustee level rather than at a PZBA or HPV level? And I just don't know the process
No.
exactly.
This board will have no part of that.
Okay.
The only boards that will be at that table are the PCBA and the HPV. Those will be
We are
only two
not
boards.
going to try to usurp the authority of the other boards.
Okay.
Legally, we can't, nor would we
We're
want
not
to.
negotiating for them.
Because we don't have the expertise in the issues that they look at regularly.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
economists.
Was there any discussion at all potentially when negotiations could start?
Our attorneys are going to see a representative from Mark IV later this week, and shortly thereafter, there will be a formal written letter submitted.
But Marty, also to answer your question, this is a public meeting, and so we made the statement that we are willing to receive a settlement offer from them. And so sort of the cat's out of the bag on that, and we don't know when or if they'll respond.
Settlement or negotiation?
Negotiation. Well, no, it's a settlement offer is what we're
They're
asking
offering
for.
literally a settlement.
We were asking the language that we didn't have time to distribute it. Yes.
Susan, you have a
So, what standing would the settlement have? If it had,
Everybody would have to sign off on it.
so a new, it would be re-presented
I don't think so.
both boards, both the HPV and planning?
Well, both boards would have to agree to something. We cannot, the Board of Trustees cannot speak for the planning board, nor can we speak for the Historic Preservation Board.
Right.
We
So I assume you would be a pass-through, because you
Yeah,
can't.
that's exactly right.
Okay, so
That's
maybe
exactly
just to use that clear language.
Yep.
You will receive it, you will accept the offer to meet and ask them for a proposal. You will receive, comprehend the proposal and pass it on.
Right.
That's really all we can do.
We're trying not to make any assumptions, because we have no idea what Mark IV is going to propose.
Requires a new site plan. If indeed they have negotiated something that has changed the footprint.
We don't know.
We have no idea what they're going to propose, or if they'll even respond.
Well, we'll see.
They, Mark IV wrote to the Board of Trustees and said, we would like to negotiate. Are you willing to do that? And it was really pretty short. It was a few lines. And so we had a thoughtful deliberation and really wanted to make sure everybody understood that we love the idea. We just don't have the power to make decisions because we're not in the lawsuits. We're not the litigant. So all we can do is say, hey, we think that's a really good idea. Let's try and get to the bargaining table. Please present us something. And this is a big difference from prior negotiations in that we're asking them to actually present us something before we agree to sit down and talk. We want to see something in writing before we sit down and talk.
I think that's, I've been across the table from the Mark IV team. They're smart guys. Why aren't they negotiating? Or why aren't they reaching out to us, the boards, or the historic preservation?
Right, or Friends of Pittsford Village.
That's where the lawsuit's
Right.
at.
Right. Because the lawsuit that was just decided, if they want to settle that, they have to settle with Friends of Pittsford Village, because Mark IV and the village are on the same side. So why aren't they reaching out to Friends of Pittsford Village?
FOPD. What is their role in this?
Well, they're critical, because all the unresolved issues involve FOPV.
Correct.
And their friends. We don't, and you have zero idea who these people are, the FOPD. You don't know it, who is, it doesn't?
It doesn't matter who they are. It's,
Everyone please address the
Why
board.
does it not matter? It matters to me, so I feel like I would like to know who the individuals, there are neighbors, they're probably friends, so I want to know who they are, and I don't know why it doesn't matter. There's a lawsuit of people are calling themselves friends of Pittsford Village suing.
We're on the other side of the case. When they came to the hearing, they were represented by Alan Knopf as their attorney. I don't have a membership list of who are members and who are not. I don't know who they are, honestly.
They have a website, just go on the website.
I know that the
It's
president,
not on the website, there needs to be more, I feel like.
the president is Amy Belistra, but other than that, I don't know who the other members are. Some of the members that I formerly knew, I believe are no longer on the board, but I don't have a current membership list. I don't know.
For a moment, I thought that you guys are on there also. Like,
No.
I have no idea,
That
right?
would
Like,
be-
we don't know, like, probably somebody in here. So I just want to know, like, why is it not a transparent thing? And why do you not want to know?
We couldn't, if we were members, we would have to recuse ourselves from all deliberation of that. And that's why Mark IV made the false accusation against Frank, because he would have had to recuse himself. But, so that's, there's fairly, in local government, there's fairly high ethical standards which we follow.
I'm not doubting that. I'm sorry that it came across that way. It just seems odd that in such a small village, we have this organization, which I actually think has been advocating for the preservation of the historic preservation. And I might be wrong. But I don't know why it's not important.
May I suggest, I think from a legal standpoint, I believe when a group is formed, a citizens group is formed, especially when they are going to bring a lawsuit, they have the right to remain anonymous, and they stay under the umbrella of the group name. So individuals are not necessarily named. They are acting as a group, and they have hired an attorney, and that attorney speaks for that group. They're not identified by individual.
It's not a question. It's not a question.
Wait, why is everybody talking while you're answering the question? I can barely hear the answer.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Thank you,
No,
Lindsay.
everybody
Thank you.
hears.
If we could all have courtesy, so we have one conversation at a time, so everybody can hear. Let me have, they couldn't hear you in the back, would you repeat that?
Okay.
Yeah. No, it wasn't your fault, it was just we had multiple conversations.
Conversations here.
Yeah.
I was asking our attorney because I thought I had read at one time that when a citizens group is formed for the purpose of bringing a lawsuit and they hire an attorney, they have the right to remain anonymous as individuals under the umbrella of that group name. I might be wrong, and so I was asking our attorney if he had ever was aware of that, and that's why we don't know individual names. They're not identified. They are identified only by their attorney. When we receive any legal papers or there was an appearance in court, it was always FOPV against the Village of Pittsford. It wasn't the individuals were never named. Is that correct?
If they wish to be anonymous, they may be anonymous. It is not a knowable fact.
Speaking of which, Bob, you mentioned the name of somebody that you think is the president, and I don't know if that's true. I might recommend that we strike that. I don't know if we can strike that from the record, but I don't know. Do you know that to be true?
I thought you said you were not sure who was the president.
No, you did say
I know who the president is.
Okay.
The president is Amy Belistra. I think that's well known, but I don't know who the other members of FOPV are right now.
I was just trying to protect.
Yeah, officers or directors would have to sign things in litigation, it's not just a fictitious name put up there.
Right.
You wouldn't know the general members if the NRA brought a lawsuit, they wouldn't list every member of the NRA, but the officers and directors,
Correct.
as a litigant, would be identified.
Right.
That's what I don't know.
Wait, so I'm confused. So somebody asked me today, who is Mark for? I'm like, it doesn't matter, it's an entity.
Correct.
That's the same answer, right?
Right.
So we don't need to know each person that's part of Mark IV, we just need to know that Mark IV has come to
Okay,
you, same
correct.
as Friends of Pittsford Village. Is it relevant who the people are?
Not
Each
not
person?
not to us. Not
I'm
to us.
asking sincerely,
Yeah.
'cause that's never occurred to me.
I would say what is relevant is what is the standing and who who can speak and decide for that entity.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's why my first question when we first started this subject was exactly that question. Who speaks for them
And we,
and what's their
yeah,
standing?
we can't definitively tell you the answer because all of our interaction and all of our correspondence has been through their attorney. There has been no spokesperson that has come to this board and said, I speak for FOPV. The only person who has done that is their attorney.
Well, for the record, I'll add, because I'm on the board, I don't have all the answers, so Amy and I invited Mahoko to lunch to answer any questions she wants, so.
Right before this meeting, because I contacted FOPD to find out who are you? Like literally had to be like, who are you? And Lindsay and I have known each other, so she said, I'm there, and I said, who are the other people? And she said, I don't know. And
I don't even know the names of our customers.
And I don't
just
know
my
my
father.
I don't know these.
As my mother.
There's a civic group, I mean, you know, doing work for us, I don't know that.
I think I have a lot more to learn, because I don't actually even understand
Well,
why they sued the village.
Okay, there's a lot of moving pieces here. If there's one thing I think we can all agree on, is this is highly
And
complex.
that,
Let's get back to business.
Well, no, that's a business. That's a question. Are you asking, why don't you ask?
Well,
I would like to know the answer to that.
what is the question? What is the question?
Why did FOPD sue the village?
Originally, FOP sued the village because they were challenging the issuance of the special use permit. One aspect was over the open meetings law, and I think there was another. Do you remember what the other?
Environmental review.
Oh, they felt that the environmental review that was done wasn't adequate. That was dismissed by the judge, and he also, normally, when a open meetings law is challenged, the remedy is to throw out whatever approval was granted. The judge did not do that in this case.
But had the judge done it, this would have been over before I even lived in New York.
Correct, correct.
We also need to remember that boards have changed over the years.
The membership of all the boards is different, has changed. There's very few people, there's just a couple people left that were present when this whole process started.
They may have died by then for all we know.
And can you explain why that matters?
That's a normal thing, but someone earlier made a comment about the work of the boards, and I think it's important because this has gone on so long. The planning board that we have today has completely different representation than the planning board had in 2013.
Hey, Bob,
Yes?
did the court rule recently that, didn't they say that the HPB and the PZBA had to go back and negotiate with Mark IV? Wasn't that one of the rulings not too long ago?
I'm not
Send them back
aware
to
of,
negotiating?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
The court did overturn the HPB said that the bulk mass and scale was not compatible with the historic context where it is. They spent many hours deliberating on it. They did extensive findings to that conclusion. The applicant appealed that decision to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals looked at that case and they upheld the decision of the HPB. That was then taken to court. The judge overturned the HPB and the ZBA's decision, which is unusual. Number one, it's unusual that a judge would substitute his discretion for the discretion of a regulatory board when there wasn't a procedural flaw. And there were no procedural flaws in this case. So the HPB has appealed that decision. I believe the ZBA has appealed that decision also. And that case is pending and expected to be heard in November.
Okay, and then we had a member of one of the boards asking a question about, I think, kind of questioning why didn't Mark IV, reach out to meet with you guys instead of the trustees. I'm just curious, as much as you know, do you know if our HPB and PZBA boards have been regularly reaching out to Mark Ford and they've just been blown off? I mean, I'm wondering, why are you, I guess, are you asking if they reached, why wouldn't they reach out to you? I'm wondering, are we reaching out to them to negotiate?
Well, there's a pending court case, so generally, I don't have access to what the legal counsel, different attorneys advise those two boards, and we are not a party to those attorney-client sessions held between the boards. So I don't know what the advice of legal counsel has been. All I do know is that both of those boards have tried to negotiate with Mark IV unsuccessfully. And, I really can't speak for them because I haven't been part of that process. Yes, Lisa?
Is it my understanding too that, in terms of consistency with the Historic Preservation Board, they have always found that the applicant at any point over the 7 years has not been in compliance with the code criteria, regardless of who was on that board?
Correct.
Yeah. And same with planning.
That is true. Different membership, same conclusions.
But, yeah, applying the code and the criteria.
Right. And it's highly unusual that two boards would agree on the same conclusion and then a court would overturn that. That's rarely happens. Yes, Susan?
I'd like to add a footnote to that. My first experience on the ZBA with Mark IV when we were hearing the appeal. And Mark IV came before us. We were a new board, promised a de novo look, and came to the similar, and that meeting took place. Mark IV asked us if they could have an additional, I think it was 2 weeks, to provide more kind of visual material, for the zoning board at the time to, they thought that would help us better conceptualize the project. So we agreed to delay the decision for 2 weeks. We set a special meeting for Monday. On the preceding Friday, Mark IV filed its Article 78 and anticipating our upholding. But that's, so we held our meeting and came to our decision, but they requested a delay to submit additional information, didn't show up at the meeting, and on the preceding Friday filed their Article 78. So that was, my personal introduction to Mark IV.
And I think there's a number of stories like that have happened in this process, but not to get lost in the weeds of it all, because we don't have time to review it all tonight. Are there any other questions tonight before we move on to the agenda? Sure. Mm-hmm.
So, many moving parts, as you said. Some of this is still confusing. But my question is, you as a group of trustees are not in a position to negotiate. However, are you in a position to have a document or create a document that describes as accurately as possible what you believe the issues or barriers are at Mark 4 for them accepting,
Compliance with the code.
for HPV's issues, and PZBA's issues.
I can see.
Because, granted, another world, I did a lot of business negotiation, but I don't think it matters if it's business or village negotiation. If you don't know what the obstacles are, you're not going to be very likely to succeed in negotiating. So do we know what the specific barriers are from all three parties?
Susan?
So this, it's not a barrier, it's compliance with a code and with other documents like the LWRP, which are very specific in terms of what is contextual and appropriate for this historic village. So all Mark IV would have to do is look at those documents and present something that was in compliance with those guidelines.
There's no interpretation? It's very...
There's a degree of interpretation, but again, look at our findings. I think there's historic, and then there's canal commercial, but those are pretty. They're quite detailed in the LWRP, especially as to what on this national treasure. By the way, with view sites, view sheds that we would like to have preserved in a certain way. It's very detailed. What is appropriate and contextual, and the right thing to be on that split land.
So putting aside whether I use barriers or issues or whatever the term is, I don't want to get hung. Can you give me an idea how many we're talking about? Are there 3 things you
How many what?
objected to?
How many? There are pages.
50 things?
There are pages of examples, illustrations. It's a long document, the LWRP. The village code is not short either, but they are a big company that are used to looking at documents like that.
Elisa?
Yeah, this isn't Mark IV's first rodeo as a developer, and they've done other waterfront developments, and so, I think, and also, everything that's in the code in terms of, relative to historic preservation or the waterfront revitalization plan, those things are derivative of the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. So this isn't somehow like, well, I think we want it this way. This is really, the code is highly derivative from other templates and things that have been proven and proven in the past.
And the village comprehensive plan, which as a document.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the origin of where the requirements came from. I'm trying to get
Len, could you talk to the board?
I'm trying to understand, do we have a technical documented list of issues, barriers, non-compliance points, whatever you want to call them?
Read the findings.
Hold on. The various parties have conducted negotiations. Early on, the village board came up with 14 criteria where the bait and switch plan, the plan that they switched with the original plan that was approved, differed in negative ways with potential adverse environmental consequences, and that was given to the applicant. The APRB spent about, 7 months, I believe, developing multiple options that would meet their criteria for visual compatibility, but would still give the developer the same density. And all of that was blown off. So virtually everything that you suggested has already been tried either by our board or one of the other 2 boards. So I think that's important to put that on the record.
Can I jump in? So Len, I get what you're saying, that a matrix of understanding what each of the parties' interests are. I think that's a really useful idea and probably worth talking about some. just kind of mapping it out, and then you know where everybody stands and that kind of thing. And that's conventional wisdom that's shared, particularly among this group. They really know this stuff, but it might be a good idea to write it down and organize it in a way that is easier to digest. The other thing
we
that I
have
want
done
to
that. We have, in both parties, Mark IV has given us their criteria, and we've responded giving them the criteria of the various boards.
But all the boards and Friends of, what we think Friends of Pittsford Village want and what we think Mark IV wants, and articulating that and understanding it is, I think, important. The other point that it brings me to, I know you didn't ask for this, but it brings me to the fact that there's, 15 people in this room, and they're very engaged people, and there's probably a lot more people who have questions out there similar to what you guys have raised tonight, and this has been a very fruitful conversation. So I wonder if a next step for us is to really hold an open Q&A like this for a broader group of people. I don't know whether we're allowed to do that, but we're allowed to say we can't answer that because our attorney advised us not to, but it might not be a bad idea to have an open forum where people can come and ask questions and learn and that kind of thing.
I would suggest that a coffee and conversation format would be the appropriate thing to do. That's worked well to disseminate information on things like the zoning update and the comprehensive plan. So, yes, Margot.
As an outsider, my name is Monroe. Am I allowed to speak?
Yes, anyone is allowed to speak. You don't have to be a village resident to speak at our meeting.
Okay, so when I was interested in your question, I have to say that since the 2016 election, I've become a little bit cynical, and I'm going to address the board now, so you can look at me or not. But so I have heard from other sources and other townships and so forth that the developers have a habit of sometimes bribing people and bribing judges, bribing government officials, bribing anybody who will help them bend the law a little bit, and we see it coming down from the top, and it's really appalling. So I think that Alicia said he's been around the block a few times, and this is not his first rodeo, and so I just think that we have to be careful and make sure that that all the players involved are not in any financial need, shall I say, because it's just appalling that people who are corrupt can corrupt other people, and I just think that we need to that's my whole passion in life, is how people can interact with each other and how to be upward. My own son is in the hospital now because he doesn't tell the truth to himself. He says, "Oh no, I'm fine," and he's sick. So I think that we need to just be very honest with ourselves and with one another, and I hope I haven't been too irrelevant about all of that, and transparent, and move forward and say, we're not gonna play games, Mark.
And Margot, I think you bring up a good point, in addition to the other points that you made, is that there is an integrity to the process itself. And even though the process is lengthy, it's long, it's incredibly frustrating, it's expensive, but it's there to do exactly what you're talking about, to protect everybody's interests and ensure that there's a fair playing field for the review, and that it's done in a transparent and legal way. And when you start bending the rules or trying to expedite things, then you're subjecting different people to different standards, and you're not being fair or just. And that really is in direct opposition to the intent of all the laws that we have tried to follow. As difficult and challenging and time-consuming as it has been, I can tell you that everybody on every board that I know has done diligence to follow the law to the letter, dot their I's and cross their T's. And that's something that I'm very proud of.
Yes, and I just wonder who stands to gain by all of this 6-year delay and 8-year delay and all the litigation and all the carrying on. Who stands to gain? Smartphone.
I can tell you we're not making any money. I can tell you that.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Peggy?
I don't know if you can answer this question or not, so, because you've decided to converse with the developer, does that mean that you're not gonna file an appeal?
No, no. We don't know what the outcome would be. I'm not gonna make any assumption on what the outcome will be. We're optimistic that it would be different than it has been in the past, but we don't know that. And even if we didn't appeal, we believe that the two primary parties that are involved in the current case, Mark IV and Friends of Pittsford Village, one of them would appeal. So, you know.
We want to be clear that we don't know if we're going to talk to the developer.
I know, you're just announcing tonight that you're willing to talk.
Yeah, and because it's something that it's really one of the only things that we can do besides nothing. And so it's not nothing. And we hope that it's emblematic of a step toward a resolution. That's all we can hope for.
We're not talking. We're not having a conversation with them, not
I
talking.
hear you.
They're just submitting a written, firm offer, proposal. We are not talking. We don't have the right to.
I want to make one other technical point, because there was a comment about the other boards reaching out to the developer. And there are certain legal differences between the Board of Trustees and appointed regulatory boards. And there's a general rule in training for whether it's a preservation board, a ZBA, an environmental board, or a planning board, that you don't have chats or negotiation outside the process. Just like with this board, the actual work of the board is supposed to take place within the public view in the meeting. And that's why we have open meetings laws in New York State, so that all of you have an opportunity to see the work we do and what the outcome is. And so, but even more so with the planning board and the preservation board, they are encouraged by law not to really have outside conversations with applicants, because there's no way to assess that every applicant is being treated in the same way and fairly. So there's good reason for that standard.
I want to be respectful of people's time and open to their questions, but also we've been at this for almost 3.5 hours, so I wouldn't mind a break.
Is there any other questions we can answer before we move on to other topics? Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and we will be putting out a newsletter that will have a summary of the long saga that is 75 Monroe.
When do you think that newsletter's coming out? Just so I can let people know.
Well, it depends. If we approve an item tonight, then I'll have to talk to the people that are going to write it and get a schedule. So I'm not sure, but it would be sometime this fall. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Can we make a motion to take a break for 10 minutes?
We'll have a 5-minute recess.
Second.
All right, so moved. I think the St. Louis correspondence is self-explanatory.
I certainly hope so.
Non-municipal use.
She left.
She left because she
That's okay. Okay, we'll just make a motion.
Who's calling it back in order?
I'll make a motion to call the meeting back to order. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. First item we have is a non-municipal use permit for the Rochester Prep West Campus Elementary School.
It needs a shorter date because it's like next week or something.
It's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. So
we've got to waive the 45
Yeah,
degree waiting period. Okay.
I will make that motion that we waive the 45-day requirement for the ovarian cancer. Town Teal is really what it is. And this group is championing a young man that works in their school.
I second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next thing we have to schedule.
The second motion is that we grant a non-municipal use permit to prep school in order to tie teal ribbons on our lampposts.
I second the motion. All in favor? Aye.
Is there
Then-
anything else you need from us?
As long as you're good with waiving the insurance requirement, all they're doing is tying the ribbons.
And they're
It's
just
just
teachers?
for
Are they adults?
teachers doing
Okay.
that in support of someone in their school. So I don't wanna overcomplicate this.
Did you have a question, Marty?
In regards to that, I have
Go.
a concern, because every year when these go up, they're up for an undisclosed and undefined amount of time. And while I think the cause might be admirable, they're also visual pollution, and they've been up in some cases a couple years ago for months. So
Yeah, no.
is there a timeline to this? When
Yes.
Yes.
If you put them up, you should take them down, I mean, not opposed, just, 1 week, 2 weeks, what's, because they've been up, they literally are visual pollution.
I think it's a 1 week thing, isn't it?
Yes, well, I don't know
I
that
don't
it is,
think
but
they're
they,
looking for a month.
I think they've asked for the month,
Yeah.
1 month?
and then they
Yeah,
come
I
around
think
and
the
take them
month is
down.
actually
I
in,
think that's excessive, I'm just gonna point that out.
I think,
I think that's.
They're on
excellent.
outposts, I mean, they're on every single vertical surface that's in the village, and I
This is-
applaud the effort, I just think it's too much.
Okay. They have specifically indicated that our light posts, and they have done this before, this isn't
Oh,
the
yeah, it's
first.
every year.
yeah, they're looking to do from 9:25 to 10:31. Obviously, the board can determine.
Can we have them remove, have a stipulation that they come back and remove them at the
Yeah.
end of the month?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Oh, it's already in here. Where is that?
Even though they say they do,
Oh, thank you.
they don't.
This is actually a different group.
Is it?
Yes, it's a different
Please
group.
make sure that we hold them to this.
Yep, yep. We'll emphasize the
Specifically
removal.
say that they'll remove
Okay.
them, though. Just-
Motion on the floor. Any other discussion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have to schedule some code meetings. There's a number of things. I'm trying to get some technical answers on the options that Steinmetz presented us on the special permit. I have had other stuff I've had to do the last 2 days, so I'm gonna try to set that up in the next day or so. Jeff has said he is available tomorrow night, Thursday night, and possibly Friday night, depending on the schedule for everybody else on the board. But I suggest we set some times.
I cannot do Friday night, I'm out of town.
Okay, all right, so that's, Dan, you're out on Friday.
And bear in mind, this would have to be an emergency meeting because there's not we don't have the time, but in my judgment, this is an emergency.
Have you made progress on the new stuff that sent over yesterday, was it?
I'm through item 80-ish.
Okay, and
And
it gets
I'll
to
finish
about.
I'll finish it.
800?
I'll finish tomorrow.
Okay, great.
So I'll be ready, and a lot of it is trustee stuff that's
Yeah.
going to be discussed.
It's complicated stuff.
So there's
This
two
is,
parts.
this is your stuff that you just gave us.
Yeah.
That list, we want to get through that, let's call it Wednesday, and Thursday, special use, or could special use wait till next Tuesday?
Special use can wait. I mean, that's this board's decision. It's going to be depending on when Bob gets his research done. But I think it's going to take us 2 meetings to get through the planning board stuff.
I agree. But
Without
before we
talking-
even get,
Without just,
Yeah.
So theoretically, tomorrow night and Thursday night, to get through the remainder of the outstanding issues with the PBCA.
I'm perfectly available, but I'm not.
All right, so you wanna do tomorrow night at 5:30?
Okay.
Can I address the board briefly as to where we're at, by the way?
Sure.
Just as somebody said, some comments, we're, as I think I said not too long ago, various members are really, really busy, whereas a lot of people are out of town. That's, and starting the week of October 7th is when the people are back. We have, our next meeting is scheduled for, I think, that Monday, October 7th. We have not been able to finish documenting all of the things we've already raised. Hopefully that'll happen within the next week or so we can get that out to you. Some more documents are going to come. We haven't been able to write up our notes and minutes for all the meetings we've had yet, but should be not too much longer. I think based on some of the discussions we've already had, a couple of our larger concerns was some substantial rework of both site plan review and the special permits review is probably needed, and that'll take some thinking. So that's all the comments I have right now. I don't know if you have any questions.
thank you.
Good, thank you.
Can we talk offline about a schedule on delivering just so I can help you hit it on delivering the next batch of notes, because we do need to keep on our schedule. So we'll talk about what's possible for you, and I'll just try and help you hit those dates.
Okay.
Thanks. So tomorrow at 5:30? 6? 5:30?
5:30 to Burnett.
Wednesday and Thursday? Is that where we are?
I can't do Thursday.
So Renee can't do Thursday, I can't do Friday.
I prefer not Friday
Monday.
myself, so. Have we settled on Wednesday and Thursday? You're still looking?
Monday.
I would rather go Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday. Than Tuesday, Wednesday.
and Monday.
Then
I'm not here
Tuesday,
next
Wednesday.
week. I'm not here next week.
Okay.
Oh, so we're probably not gonna get a date where everybody is here, but, all right, so we've got tomorrow, we've agreed on tomorrow on Wednesday. What other dates are the most people available for?
Anything but Friday.
Friday, and Lily doesn't want Friday either, so that's fine. And Renee, you're not available on Thursday. Frank, you are available on Thursday?
I'm available Thursday.
You're available Thursday. But not next week. So the options would be Thursday or Monday. Preference? Which is better for people?
On Thursday, we don't have Renee. On Monday, we
We
don't
don't
have
have
Frank.
Frank.
So, if somebody make a call. I prefer Monday just so we don't have 3 meetings in a row at night.
I'm fine with Monday.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's do, is that all right with you, Frank? We'll do it
He's not
without you
gonna
on
hear.
Monday. You'll be away.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we've got
5:30 on Monday,
Wednesday and Monday, is that
What day is that?
And Thursday?
30th.
the 30th.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Monday.
Okay, got it.
No, just Wednesday and Monday.
Wednesday and Monday.
Right, no Thursday.
No
No.
Thursday.
No Thursday.
No.
We're just doing 2 meetings for now.
Okay.
Okay? All right? Okay, Jeff, you're excused, I think.
All right, we're-
Thanks for being here for that whole.
Yeah, that's pretty crucial stuff, huh?
Okay.
Cutting edge.
Well, it was good to have the discussion. I think people need to hear, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot to digest. Okay, next item. Member items. I attended a committee meeting. Good night, Jeff. On the Erie Canal Nature Park and Preserve, right? And so did Renee. Renee was there also. Yes. I sat down next to her. I said hello to everyone. I didn't see Renee was sitting next to me. Anyway, 2 things. They will be coming before this board at some point because there's a small section of trail that crosses the northern tip of our property to go from town property to the Auburn line. So they will be coming to us for that. The schedule on this, they showed a few more drawings of the barn is going to be fully reconstructed and the trail completed by June 20th next year.
Wow.
They're preparing submissions that will go to the planning board and the preservation board for the barn. And we talked about all of that. They also have to go to SHPO because the state got state funds, so there's a 1409 review required from New York State. I believe the town board is planning to be lead agency.
Yes. And that the LWRP is scheduled for October already, I think, right? For the planning board?
I think so. I think
The
they're
planning board
ready.
knows nothing about this.
Really?
No one has talked to the planning board about anything regarding. I assume that's the town's park,
But
correct?
I don't understand why the town is lead agency on a village, a property that's in the village. Why isn't the village lead agency?
Well, if they're the initiating agency, they have a right to deem themselves lead agency.
Well, now it's gonna be negotiated. They've got to
Well,
send a letter.
they have to send out a form for all the other interested agencies
Involved.
to ask, involved agencies, right, so I don't know where that is.
Make sure that they send something to Historic Pittsford as well.
think you're on the list. I'm looking at, it says Historic Preservation Board, October, the Village Planning Board and the Town Planning Board site plan approval and LWRP in October, is what it says on their
Town
timeline.
planning board? So they don't- they're
This
putting-
says Village Planning Board.
No, we had the discussion, the consultant asked today, do they need to go to the town planning board? And the answer given in the meeting was no.
Probably not, yeah, but you for sure, and they,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
thought
they
they already
can-
submitted everything is the way they made it sound as well.
I heard nothing at
Okay.
all.
Maybe
about
they
the
just
project.
prepped it and haven't, did the deadline already pass for the October meeting? October meeting's at the end of October. So, all
Like I
right,
said, I heard zero.
yeah, well, we just learned that today, and it's on their timeline, so hopefully,
The consultant is responsible for submitting all this stuff, and at least they knew the procedural steps today, and I pointed out that they do need to get approval from our board, because we'll have to have an agreement with the town to give them access over the northern tip of our property. But the plan is very nice, the barn is gonna look great, the trail is proposed to have a boardwalk section that will go through the wetlands, so I'm encouraged by the project.
To New York State.
The town got a $250,000 grant for the first phase of the project, which will construct a trail from the towpath trail to the Auburn Line Trail going right through the new nature park. It also includes money with some town funds to reconstruct the historic barn that was on Calkins Road, and to the envelope will be completed, and then in a subsequent phase, they're gonna finish off the interior, so it'll be heated, it'll be a meeting space. A future phase, they plan to have like an outdoor patio, restrooms, and a parking area somewhere on the property, but that's not part of this phase.
Are you concerned, oh, sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are you concerned that the planning board does not know about this? About, so much detail? I mean, I'm just wondering, like, I don't know if that's often the case, or?
I know the detail. Renee and I were invited by the town to sit on the committee that has been working with the consultants to design the project. In our previous meeting, we went over the review steps that are necessary, and that does require approval from the two village boards. So it is the responsibility of the consultant to do that. I assume most consultants are smart enough to call the village office and get the deadlines for submissions. I'm assuming they've done that. We didn't talk in that level of detail this morning.
That's the operational firewall that you guys don't really talk to the other
no, we
boards
just
about.
found, no, they just mentioned that they were going to be submitting their materials to the village plan, so it sounds like they haven't done it yet.
The town typically does their own, unfortunately, the school district, the town, and the village each kind of does their own thing, and communication could be improved.
It's even more difficult when the town is involved. However, in this case, they're being pretty good because they can't get a building permit until, and the LWRP was a collaborative LWRP for the town and the village, so a building permit for the project cannot be issued until they get a consistency LWRP review. And the only legal entity that can grant that is the village planning board. So whether they like to or not, they're gonna be talking to Justin.
I believe this will kick in the performance zoning as well. I know, I'm sure everyone's gonna enjoy that, but,
They wouldn't have to apply under performance zoning.
no, if they want a building permit, they do.
I don't think it's required, is it, Justin?
In the current code it is, in the new code it's optional.
Yeah.
That's been something that's been debated as,
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying, I think.
Because as long as they followed the underlying zoning, they shouldn't have to apply on that.
Well, I guess that can,
But anyway, that's another, what's that?
I'm waiting for papers that Dorothy printed for me.
We didn't do this.
I'll find out. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, all right, not to get distracted, let's get through the rest of the meeting. Is there any other questions on the nature park?
Yeah. Did we do this contract?
The bush.
No, not
Not
yet.
yet, no, we're getting there.
Are we doing member items?
Member items, yes.
I've got a member item.
Okay, go ahead.
I was very concerned about the way the conversation went about the press release at our last meeting. So I wanted to do a little research to see what was the proper procedure. And as you all recall, I was here with Bob when the news people called and they gave Bob the press release. And I was here when Bob called Chuck Malcolm and asked them to write a release for us. And it came back just a few minutes later, and Bob gave the press release to Dorothea to give to the news media. The question was, did the mayor have the authority to do that without consulting with the board? And I was concerned about that too. We should always act in a proper procedure. So I checked it out. In the audits that the state controller has done, that I've read, including our own, when they make reference to the mayor, they always refer to the mayor as the chief executive officer of the village. 1. 2, I went to village law, section 4400, the powers that the mayor has. And one of them is he can intervene in any and all actions at the direction of the board where deemed necessary to protect the rights of the village and its inhabitants. So it seems to me that prior to, I think, you, Dan, and Renee, the board gave that authority to Bob where he felt it was proper to take that action. And I think he was proper in taking that action. And I believe that at the meeting that followed, Bob did offer either to read it or to distribute it. My whole point is
Correct.
that I wanted to clarify the authority of the mayor and that he acted properly. And that's my whole point. Last point, in a training session by the state controller, New York Department of State Division of Local Government, characteristics of a public officer, many of them that include, may involve the exercise of discretion and independent judgment. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted to clarify that issue because that really did bother me.
And I would say for myself, it was never my intent to have it. I didn't write it, I didn't edit it. It was written by Hodgson Russ to defend the position the board adopted in July. And I checked with Hodgson Russ because I knew it needed to go out fast because Mark IV's press release was out there and it needed to be done expeditiously. I think I acted in the proper fashion and I did present it at the meeting. I think that was appropriate.
Thank you for looking that up, Frank, because I did ask the question, because that's the first time I saw it. And so I did say this was sent out and we haven't seen it yet, which I think is a courtesy regardless of law. I wasn't questioning his authority at all to do this. I was asking if it had gone out. So I appreciate that you that you looked that up.
Yeah.
I wanted to just know that we all got a chance to see it. Even if we weren't able to comment or anything, just having the courtesy of seeing it before it goes out to the media.
Yeah.
That was my only issue.
Well, I think you all saw the release that we got from the news media.
I hadn't seen
We
it
did
prior
not.
to, we walked in, that was
No.
the first time I had heard of it, and that's why.
They still haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But
That was never distributed to the trustees.
yeah, well, yeah, because of that short time span. But the news release was not good, And so, in the interest of trying to get a response out that puts some reality into it, that's the way the mayor acted. And so I just wanted to make sure that,
Yeah.
that the mayor was acting properly.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, Frank. So the concern is, in the moment that you receive the press release and forward it to the attorneys, it's not very hard to CC the rest of the trustees. That doesn't take very much time. So that's really all we're asking for. The second point is, I think we all saw tonight in that room back there when we crafted this message together and worked on it together and ran it by the attorney and said, how's that sound? Does that sound, are we saying what we should say?
Yeah.
I think we achieved a really positive thing for us and for the village. And that was done because we collaborated on it. And just want that chance to be able to collaborate. And certainly, and if time doesn't allow for that, at the very least, just CC us on it.
Let me just say one other thing, which I had assumed when Chuck Malcolm sent it out, he copied everybody. I didn't look because I was running around trying to get it to the proper people. I thought normally they send it to the entire board, and that's why I didn't even think to recopy everybody else, because I thought it had already gone there.
Where it's practically possible.
Yes.
You want to do
Yes,
that,
of
but
course.
sometimes news media, the people will stop you right on the street and you're exiting the building and they'll stick the mic in your face.
Dorothea can verify this, because I was here
You
in
have
the
to be able to
office.
speak for the board.
And
You have to be able
I kept getting phone calls from Channel 8, WXXI, Channel 21, and then I had a TV interview I had to do on the same day. So it was a little bit of chaos, and I apologize that it was not my intent not to forward it to all of you. It's just that sometimes that happens.
It was a confusing meeting anyway, and there's lots of.
Yep. Anyway,
So
okay.
Thank you, Frank, for clarifying.
Good.
All right, who else has member items? Renee, you
You
had
took
one?
my member item.
Oh.
I'm the one who put that on the agenda, but that's okay.
What did I take?
The Erie Canal.
Oh, I'm
Park,
sorry.
That's all
I'm
right.
sorry.
I told her either one of us could handle it, and you know the project better than I do, so I'm all done. It's my member item.
We did correct the doors on the barn. They were going to have the structural frames on the exterior. And I explained to them that in the middle 19th century, when bank barns were common in western New York, the structural frame for the door was always on the inside because that's better for weatherization.
And that wasn't a we. I like that he said we. I
Well, I
wouldn't
was
have
trying
done
to give
that.
you credit.
Yeah, no.
It was all Renee. It was all Renee. Okay. Any other Lily member item?
No, I would like to let the board know that when they took the flowers down, I think the Pittsford Garden Club took some of them, right? They were offered to them
Okay.
for a replant.
I think that they're at the DPW. I don't think we've gone there yet, but yeah.
Right. And that this year we're going to forego the mums in the urns at the four corners as a huge cost-saving measure.
Sure.
I'm trying to do my bit.
Yep.
And so the urns have been put away.
Good.
So.
I'll say it again, I've said it before, the flowers were the best flowers we've ever had, so whatever those are,
Yeah,
let's
special,
order them
I
again.
found those special. I'm trying to keep the name secret. So
Yeah,
they don't get
they were
stolen.
spectacular, so thank you on that, Lily.
I have one member
Okay.
item.
Oh, sure, Dan, go ahead.
We talked a few weeks ago about backfill for Terry Robbins, and from an archivist standpoint, I just want to keep that one alive because we really don't want to let that go unfilled.
Have we heard from Sophie, Dorothea?
Sophie, she spoke to us, she's
I think
working.
she's gonna take it.
Sophie will pretty soon be shifting into the office, so she'll be covering the records archive
Okay.
until final decision is made.
Great.
So,
I assume we'll get to a formal job description and change her over and that kind of stuff.
well, no, she'll still work in DPW. She isn't interested in coming in full time into the office.
She loves what
She loves being
does
outside, so
yeah.
we're gonna try to juggle both.
Okay.
Find a way.
And we'll figure out a way to get Terry to work with her to train her and that kind of stuff.
Uh,
That's complex stuff.
She has been working with
Okay,
Terry over
great.
the last couple of years. We have been doing that cross training.
Terrific.
Can I say something about records archives? as you recall, when we were in the executive session, I once again made the statement that we should have a list of all the lawsuits that we've been undergoing for the past 6, 7, 8 years. We still don't have it. And I really believe for our good and for the public, because there were a lot of questions tonight about lawsuits that have been filed that we couldn't answer. And so I think if we had a list, a brief, concise summary and status, it would really help us all, and it would be a help to the public. So now that Sophie is coming in, it seems to me that every lawsuit that is lodged against the village, we get served. So we must have the papers.
Correct.
So can we ask Sophie to make that one of her projects?
I anticipate her in by the end of November, so I can't say it's gonna be something in the next few
Frank, we
weeks.
could start to develop that. I think Mindy has developed something like that for the suits involving the planning board. Is that correct, Justin?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I'm not-
yeah, you wouldn't know, right?
I have a pretty good idea of, I think I have all the papers from the early ones, but,
But we could start assembling
We
that.
can, it's
Yeah.
just, I can't promise it right away,
No,
because
Dorothy is,
she's in and out right now.
Okay.
but I
But
agree,
I
I
can
agree
get
with
her
you,
on
Frank. It would be very helpful, and I think especially in this newsletter, just to have, so people see who sued who, and a list of every lawsuit. I think it would be very enlightening for everybody to see that, because I think, as was apparent tonight, even people that have sort of followed this, nobody really understands all of the detail and all the pieces that are in it. So I think that's a very good idea.
And there's still, at this late date, a misconception that the village is also suing people, and we're
Correct.
not.
Correct. But part of that's the misinformation that's been put out there, and that's why I think the enhanced newsletter dealing with 75 Monroe, the comp plan, and the zoning update is a really critical piece of information to get. Even if we don't put any of our normal stuff in there, just to get summaries of those three things, I think is incredibly important.
Okay. All right, good.
Okay? All right, going back to, Bill McBride and I are supposed to meet, and he looked at this briefly, but did everyone see the proposal? We had met with Bush Communication previously. They gave a proposal that we rejected because they wanted, it was more money than we wanted to spend, and it was for like a ongoing fee. And I think at this point, all we want to do is one, sort of enhanced newsletter that really communicates the core message of the three things I just mentioned.
So this 12-month engagement is not the one to look at?
Because that looks like a lot.
Yeah, that was
$32,000.
Yeah, no, there's another one that's less than that.
So it's just gonna be for, how much money do we usually spend on when we send out a
4,000.
4,000?
A year.
The paper one, that includes the cost of the paper one and then the time?
We
No,
just
we
do a
don't
few
do-
paper ones that we leave here in the office typically, and I think there's maybe a few that we mail out. They've been electronic for the last.
Yeah, they've been electronic since then.
So $4,000 usually, and is that
And
in
that's
our,
like-
I don't have our budget in front of us.
My question on this is, I'm not sure why we're outsourcing this when we've got two writers on the board and we've got real money problems. Like, I don't see why we wouldn't just talk as a group, come up with what we want to talk about, write a draft, run it by you guys and have you edit it. And because we got to get somebody up to speed who knows nothing about this. It's entirely in our capabilities to do it for free. I don't understand why we would pay.
Because I think if we really want it effectively, it's not just about good writing, it's also, I think we're gonna need some graphics in here, that, especially with the comp plan and zoning updates that will convey it. I think.
Okay, also within our capabilities.
Do we have, I don't see a cost on how much this is gonna be yet. I see a $32,800 total cost, and you're saying that's for 12, that's not the current, That's not the current proposal. So
I
it
thought-
would just be
I-
one monthly retainer here?
That's what I was
Okay,
thinking,
so that's,
one
so we
monthly
should be looking
retainer.
at the 2,734.
I thought I saw, wasn't it 3,000?
It's 2734.
Yeah, 2734.
Okay, and if
Yeah.
we usually, they're gonna do this, and this would be in lieu of what we normally spend $4,000 on, so we'd actually be saving money on this one, is what you're telling me?
Well, we haven't
But this
done a
is-
newsletter yet this year, so we
Okay.
have two
2-in-1.
2-in-1. But I think we're due for, these are important issues that we want to convey. And I think we might also want to convey some of the survey information that would, along with the comp plan, because the results from the survey inform the comp plan. It's something we need to get out. I don't have the time to write it. I don't know, Dan, if you have the time to write something like this.
I do.
But I think we have to, again, we have a heavy schedule, and I'm just worried that we're gonna have to, it's gonna take some time to do this right.
I would, given the information that we're trying to put out at this time about the comprehensive plan, the code, it's complex. It's a little complex, both graphically and almost writing. I'd like to see what they do.
That's a good, let's get some samples, okay.
I'd like to see what they do. So,
Okay.
So does somebody want to propose something?
I'd just have them give us an example of how they would, here's all the information we want to get out there, what kind of format are you gonna put it in?
Okay.
I'd like to see.
Sure. I think that's a fair request. And I think we could, given the topics, we can get a bit more specific information.
And this is the contract here is still a little confusing. It says monthly retainer, $2,734, and then it says it's a 12-month engagement that runs from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020, and it says 12-month engagement. So I want to make sure we're not locking ourselves into this $32,000.
Yeah,
We can't afford that.
We're not buying one.
Yeah, no, we're not doing
Okay, but the contract right now looks like it's for 12 months, and that we would owe at the first of every month $2,730, the way this is written. So
I think we can get them to tighten this up. I spoke to Bill McBride earlier today. We were gonna meet on this and come up with a new list of things to tighten this up. But I like the idea of getting sample stuff too.
Some samples would be good.
Frank, my other question is for you, because you're good at this. What, do we have to put this out for bid for three different vendors? I don't remember.
It's under $10,000.
Yes, we do. I'm looking at these numbers, and we do need 3 bids.
But wouldn't it be a professional service?
But there are also other professional services.
I thought when it was a professional service, you didn't necessarily, if it's something specialized, you didn't need 3 numbers.
But this isn't
My-
that specialized.
Well, the reason I'm saying that for this type of job, though, it's a lot of time to put a proposal together, so for a fairly small amount of money, we're gonna pay them.
My
So-
question is what they do unique enough that they have an edge over the competition? If they do, we don't have to get 3 bids, but it seems to me like there are.
Let me talk to Bill McBride, because that's more his expertise, his field.
Yeah.
And I'll
But in
get
this
some
case,
advice on that.
in this case, I'm sure we need 3.
I'll follow up and I'll come back with something, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all right. Any other member items from anyone else? Okay, let's move on to the treasurer's report.
Okay.
SRF.
No, that's circled.
I don't know. That was the only one that was circled, was
Yeah.
SRF.
Yes, just SRF for the Maple Street County.
So why is that circled? What's the
Just,
issue?
she's pointing it out.
It's not a normal monthly
It's
expense.
out of
Okay,
norm.
gotcha.
Okay.
It's not something you normally see.
I haven't seen attorney's bills in a while, just as.
She sent them to you. She said she was reading them.
Okay.
I will follow up with her in the
Okay.
morning.
I'll follow up with her, she and I'll talk. Get
Okay.
it all organized. I just haven't, maybe I missed them, but I haven't seen them in a while.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion on the bills?
I'll make a motion to approve the bills in the amount of $17,435.92.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
No, I had a
Is it
couple
just
of-
notes?
Nope,
Minutes, maybe?
nope. I had
Dorothy has a few items.
I have something, I just have to get this. Oh, yes, I included in your packet an ethics form for approval.
Look good to me.
If the board's good with it, I will proceed to use it.
Jeff Turner got this from, I think he got it from Nikon.
Nikon passed it on through what they use, and we just adapted it for our use.
Our law requires that we have this, and we currently don't have one on the books.
I assume that it's pointing to the right chapter. I
Yes,
didn't
Jeff
look
checked
up.
all
Yeah,
that out.
okay.
Yeah.
I just,
He customized it for us.
I filled in what he said and he reviewed what I did.
I'll make a motion to approve its use.
I'll second Dan's motion. All in favor?
Real quick, I'm gonna present this for Zach. He wanted me to start the conversation on tree plaques. We have a possibility of someone wanting to purchase a tree for donation. In the past, the board talked about a $300 price point. Looking at plaques in different styles, a nice plaque might run somewhere from $150 to $160. So, and then including the tree and what we're trying to cover with the cost of the tree, the anticipation of charging $300 for a donated tree isn't correct. It's not enough. So we're talking more like $750 to $800 to donate a tree. If we're looking at having it installed and having a guarantee for, replanting for a year, plus the cost of maintenance and everything else that are involved with this, we need to look at a different price point. He's going to be getting examples of different type plaques that we can use. Maybe we can adjust down a little bit from there, but he just wanted to get an overall sense from the board if that's the right direction you want to go.
I think it makes sense. Has someone offered to donate a tree?
There was someone asking about donating a
Okay.
tree, and we wanted to make sure we gave him the right info and the cost, and he was looking at this.
I think, we wouldn't necessarily have to include maintenance costs because that's something we're gonna do anyway. But I think, $500, $600, that's less than it would cost to donate a bench, and I think that's still reasonable if the plaque, as long as the plaque is something that's gonna hold small, but durable.
And this is another question, Nancy's looking at different styles. There's types you can chain to the tree, or you can put at the base. So what style is the board leaning to? And obviously, we want to stay consistent with whatever we do.
I think if he's got a couple examples, let me take a look at them and I'll pick. We want something that, is gonna last. There's a nice
Mhm.
one where the Wagner College tree is on Washington Avenue by the,
In the ground?
It's in the ground by the Lenars house, because that's where Wagner College was founded. That's pretty nice, it's pretty small. I don't know what it costs, but
Okay.
if you put it in the ground, you gotta keep it far enough away from the tree,
Right.
that as the tree grows, it will stay
Right.
there.
There's just those concerns.
Okay?
So anticipating the $300, I think we talked about initially, is really not going
Yeah.
to be.
I
I
think,
underestimated.
Yeah.
inflation, okay,
Okay, so I'm just running that real quick, and that's all I get.
okay.
Can I ask you another question?
You may.
What are we doing about a parking lot?
The town, Dorothy was gone for a week. The town has gotten apparently one resume. We haven't gotten many applications. But Dorothy was gonna check with the town.
Yeah,
She hasn't had time yet. She's been
supposedly he sent that to me twice, and I haven't received the application, so I need to follow up with him and see what's going on.
Would we be interested in somebody part-time?
It is part-time.
It is part-time. It's 20 hours a week.
20 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're just not getting,
Yeah. I know a former sheriff who might be interested.
send him
Reach
away.
out to him, Frank.
Her.
Oh, her, well,
Yeah.
okay.
Send her my way.
Good,
I
okay.
mean,
You
we're,
thinking of moonlighting, Frank? No?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, if you know somebody that's a potential candidate.
really, if you
yeah.
know someone who wants,
Yeah, you see her walking around the village all the time.
Okay, well, she might as well get paid for it.
that's,
Paid for
get
it.
paid to walk.
Meeting notes? I only had one comment on the very last one, so I'll try to
I have several comments.
Okay.
hurry it up. That's it.
All right, the second set,
Well, can we approve the first set?
Oh, yeah.
for our
well, I
comments?
didn't know if all of August 13th gets approved together though, right?
No, there was two sets.
Okay, all right, then I have nothing in that first set.
Okay, that's the 5:30.
Yeah.
Okay,
5:30 meeting,
okay, so,
so only the three of us can, I'll make a motion to approve the 5:30, August 13th.
Is there a second?
That has to be Lily or Frank.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
Abstain.
okay, the next one.
So then the second set from the 13th, my name is misspelled up top, not a big deal.
And
It's
I'll
all
tell
right.
you.
You got it right in all the other ones?
Nope, I'll tell you who did that, Joanne.
All right. Oh my gosh, she's known me way longer than
Yep,
you.
it's
Okay,
Joanne.
I'll rather a little
She's
bit.
usually really good, too.
And then, so that's up top, and then at the second page of those notes at the bottom, it says, instead of land fear, it says land zero here, so we just need to correct her name. It says Mayor
Okay.
Harvey made a motion, seconded by trustee land zero here.
I'll correct those.
Okay. And
Okay.
then that's all I have for those sets.
And so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, August 13th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
And then we have the meeting of August 20th.
Yes, the only thing I wanted to add to this is, on the last page, it talks about how there was a whole scheduling conversation. This was the joint meeting between
Yep.
the PZBA. I'll send you the output of that, because we
Okay.
had it, it's in a little picture that you can put in here, because we talked about it for a really long time.
Right.
And just want to make sure it's included.
Yep.
Okay,
Great.
so
And then,
I'll forward that to you, go ahead.
what do you have on the 20th? Are you all done on that?
That's it.
Okay, where it's, first page, right under code review headline there, the second paragraph says Mayor Corby informed everyone that the purpose section for the PDD code. I don't know what that's supposed to say, but that doesn't make sense.
Well, right.
Right? Okay. The purpose section, that makes sense. So it should read, Mayor Corby informed everyone that he will write the purpose section for the
A
PDD.
Revised.
Revised?
A
Okay,
revised.
No, that he revised.
Yeah.
He will write a revised section. Okay.
Somehow that got cut out.
That's all right, and then on page 2, the bottom paragraph where it says 98% of village traffic moving, or 98% of traffic moving through the village is commuter traffic. I don't know where that number came from, but I don't think it's right. 98% is high, I would say the majority of, to be safe. I don't know that anyone's gonna come back and ever be like,
There was,
98%?
where that came from, they did, so this was in the 2005 traffic common study with Dan Burden in SRF.
Okay,
They actually did, had someone standing on, I think it was Jefferson Road, and they did when cars were stopped at the light, they asked them, where are you from? Where are you coming from?
okay,
And-
so that's
and it
right
was
then.
96% were not even from the town of Pittsford or the village. They were from Victor, Parrington.
So I'll change it to 96, as long as we can cite that. I just didn't
Here's-
wanna
here's-
randomly put a.
What do I say about changes, if I may? If it was stated at the meeting, that number 98%, if that's what it said at the meeting,
Right,
then that's what we have to say in the minutes.
but
We
it looks
can't-
like I said it and I didn't
Change it.
say it, so I wouldn't have said
Well,
98.
we can change things.
You understand what I'm saying? We can't.
Yes, we can't change.
We can't
revisionist
change what we
history.
said.
Yes,
No.
But if it
But it
doesn't
looks-
accurately reflect who or what was said.
right,
it
so
can be
either
changed.
you or I said it, and if you said it, I just wanted to
I,
check, 'cause if
I
I
think,
said
I
it,
think it was
okay,
me,
then we leave it
because
in.
I was referencing, and I would say the vast majority, I wouldn't say,
Okay, I don't remember,
because, down to that percentage point, I could be off a percentage point or two.
right,
I am a geek,
I'm
but
I don't know how big of a deal it is,
with
but
that.
not a geek with a good memory.
2005.
Right,
that's all I have.
okay. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 20th, 2019,
With the changes.
with the changes of proposed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Okay, and
That's it.
we don't have another executive session, do we?
No, I always put one on
Oh,
because
okay,
for some
okay.
reason we always.
Okay, I think we're ready to end the meeting.
Yeah.
No, okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marty and Nahoko, for staying to the end.
Thank you for your.
Oh, you're very welcome.